Hey everyone. I hope everyone's doing great out there. This is Calvin Hendryx-Parker with 6 Feet Up. I'm joined by my friends at Eighth Light today for an incredible Battle of the Bots webinar. So we're going to go ahead and I'll share my screen. This is going to be, I was telling them earlier, if you're familiar with the term internet ugly, it's going to be raw. It's going to be like real. We're going to be demoing live stuff with terminals and editors. So don't be too scared. Feel free to jump into the comments with questions. We've got Juanita and Pia are going to be on, like watching for questions. I assume Doug can also help field any kind of questions and tell us, like Travis and I, that we should make sure we answer some of those things. Again, I'm Calvin Hendryx-Parker. I'm CTO of co-founder of 6 Feet Up. We are a Python and AI for good agency that helps impactful leaders solve hard problems. That's one of our favorite things to do. Travis, why don't you give a quick intro?
Yeah, thanks, Kelvin. Travis Frisinger, Technical Director of AI at Eighth Light. We're a global software consultancy.
Awesome. Thanks. We're going to jump right in because we got a lot to cover. I've got some kind of front matter slides, but really, like, if you're not out there using agentic AI coding agents yet, you should be. They're your new pair programming partners. I think a lot of folks may be using it just as a chat GPT or Anthropic and Claude, like for your just kind of asking it code questions, but it can do so much more. This GitHub AI software survey shows that like more than 97% of the respondents are showing that they have been using AI tools in their work. So it is a rapid evolution. I don't know if we've seen anything this fast, not even the kind of internet boom compares to what we're seeing now. So I think it's definitely something to pay attention to. Those AI agents are definitely transforming how we build software, but choosing the right tool can be the difference between frustration and flow. And we'll probably show some frustration and flow today during the demos, but we're going to find out which one delivers for real world developers. So stay tuned and hold tight. We've got some contenders in the ring. I'm going to cover Aider and Goose, and then Travis and I are going to tag team on Claude Code, and then Travis, you're going to cover Cursor and Devin. We're going to try and time box them to about 10 minutes apiece so we can get through all of them and hopefully answer some questions for folks as well. And hopefully get everybody just enlightened as to what state of this systems are and where we're headed in the future. I think the key bit here is there's a lot of definitions flying around out there and a lot of ways people define things differently. And for us, AI agents is a system, and basically it's going to perceive its environment through AI and tools. So it is not only just ask a large language model a question, get back an answer. These models have been now enabled for tool usage, and you'll see that as we do the demos. They can make decisions autonomously, and they can actually act on those on your systems. Can be scary if you give it the rights and abilities to rm-rf slash. It would totally go forward and do that if you said yes, but it can take actions to achieve those specific goals. So if you were working on a software project, it can introspect the project, it can look at what it's doing, it can then run specific commands to, for example, compile resources and artifacts for the project. It can make code changes, and then it can learn from those interactions. It's adding the output for those pieces back into its context window so that it knows when something was successful or have a failure. And then you can chain these operations all together. Obviously, some of these things can go for a long time depending on the kind of task you have asked of these various agents. They do have tool capabilities, like I mentioned. They can do file systems, yeah, operations. They can actually execute code to the web search, for example, or do code execution. One thing to keep in mind, and we're going to be talking about MCP, the Model Context Protocol. If you're not careful, it can exfiltrate information off your system. If you are using untrusted prompts and things are coming into your system you're unsure of, just like with anything else, you need to be aware, kind of eyes wide open, of what's going on in there. It can plan and reason about complex tasks. You've got reasoning models out there that are capable. You've got code editing models out there that are very capable. And sometimes you can combine them into the same tool. And you can actually keep that session going across multiple sessions on your system. So it's one of the things that's nice with these agents is that you can basically have a long running session over many days, and it's like you never left their side. And then they have this self-improvement through feedback loops. Some of them will try extra hard to try and solve a problem and burn through a lot of tokens. So another thing to consider is like the various kind of tokens that are out there and how you are burning through them in your various agent tools. Travis, you want to cover this slide on the agents continued here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kelvin. So I think it's important to kind of delineate the styles, as I'm calling it, for agents. You could think of agents in maybe two main camps, kind of like the IDE or CLI, the personal kind of side of things, or what I would call the autonomous. Now, cursor, as we'll see in a little bit, is kind of blurring the line between some of these. But the IDEs, an agent, it's integrated into your workflow. It's there. GitHub Copilot, we're not reviewing it, but that'd be an example. Cursor would be an example. There's another variety there, CLI side of things, where you're dealing with terminal. It feels maybe a step backwards if you've grown up with IDE based development. But if you're a bit more old school, it's kind of just a back to what it used to be. So,
Travis, I feel seen.
absolutely. I like to use them both. I like to blend the two personally. Different use cases there. And the more interesting emergent one here, I would say, is the autonomous, or I would say more semi-autonomous type of approach. And Devin's really a firm contender in that category, with Cursor kind of having some recent developments as well.
Awesome. I think we couldn't talk about agents without talking about MCP. This is one of the power aspects that enables a lot of what's going on, is that model context protocol is going to give your session the ability to reach out and use tools. And I think you need to understand that most MCP services, servers, etc., can run locally. So you download and install some package locally, and usually you define that in your configuration for your various agentic tool. And then it can access some local resource or could access some remote resource. But that gives you the ability then to create custom MCPs that may interact with your own environment. I've got one installed on my system that's really powerful called Serena that actually launches language servers for various tooling and can actually answer questions about the structures of your code using the language servers. There's also interesting ones that are out there around documentation. So if you wanted to have an MCP server that could respond about all the knowledge of the AWS world, there's an MCP server from Amazon that actually gives you all of the documentation for all the Amazon stuff, correct or not, into your chat. Another really fun one is Playwright. So Microsoft released a Playwright MCP server that can control your browser and actually grab context from various web pages. I did want to show a quick demo of that. It's pretty powerful. So we're going to actually, I've got the Goose GUI up. Goose comes in two flavors. There's GUI and then there's the CLI version of this. But I'm going to ask it, oops, to open LinkedIn and search for Calvin Hendryx-Parker. So given that Playwright is enabled as an extension in Goose, it will now know that I've got a tool that can actually browse the web. And I didn't say anything special like, use the Playwright to open up LinkedIn. I just said, open LinkedIn and go search for Calvin Hendryx-Parker. What we're going to see here is it's actually going to analyze the DOM on the page, and then it's going to try and go to the people page. Oh, is it not going to do it? Of course, the demo guys aren't favorable to me right now. Uh, Earlier, it would actually fill in the blanks on the page. And if you've tried a browser like Comet from Perplexity right now, basically it enables that level of AI interaction with those web pages, and you can drive the web pages from the chat or even with a voice chat. Of course, the one time I do it during the demo here, it didn't want to work. I want to give it one more go because who knows? Maybe it'll work
Just a
this time.
question for you, Kelvin.
Yeah.
How do you handle permissions? Like, is that a consideration in the MCP world, or is it something that's not really being looked at too deeply right now?
So for us, like, well, I'll show. There's some interesting ones. Like Fireflies has an MCP server, and it enables OAuth. Of course, it wants me to log in. Boy, it failed twice now. I thought I had a real good go at it this time, uh, but it's asking me if it wants to like log in. It seems like it's requiring a login for people search. So that's a boo. Let's see if it goes back to the home page again. So it's trying hard here actually to get back and find me multiple ways. So it's actually scraping LinkedIn. But for example, the Fireflies MCP server has an OAuth login. So the first time you launch your Goose chat, for example, with Fireflies, it will ask you to authenticate and then use your OAuth permissions to grant certain rights and privileges to the system. Of course, now Goose is wanting to like do all the things. So given that you can now authorize for remote services, that doesn't help you when you're working against local tools. Like
Mm.
those local tools, you're not having an OAuth permission you're granting to a local thing. It just has access to your local system or whatever that MCP server is. So make sure you're only using trusted MCP servers. So that was an interesting example of using Playwright to drive a browser to make this go. This is actually what I already went over is basically you can have those assistants sitting in there, knowledgeable, have extra context. You can think of them kind of like a RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation on steroids and highly tuned to what you need. Well, let's dive into the demos because we are almost right on time. I wanted to give 10 minutes to each one of these demos. So that means we'll wrap up about top of the hour. For the two demos I want to show, this is a sample prompt I want to give to them. We have at 6 feet up a scaffolding product called Scaff that builds out a Django backend with a Next.js front end, and it has a Postgres database and a Redis cache built into it, and a Mailhog like all in there. And we run it using Kubernetes locally and in the cloud for sandbox and production. So this can throw your AI agents for a real curveball. And so I want to show off what I feel like is a powerful ability of these AI agents is to be told what to do. The first one we're going to look at actually is going to be Aider. The two tools I picked to start off with are both open source. They both allow you to bring your own models, which is a key aspect I like about that. You have the ability to not only bring models that are in the cloud, but you also have the ability to bring models running locally via Olama. So if you've got Devstrol downloaded and installed or Codex downloaded and installed into your running Olama, both these tools can use those local models and never have the chat or the data from your code leave your computer. Obviously, you need a pretty beefy computer to do that, but these both give you that capability. The benefit I find with Aider over some of the other ones is it is very, very Git aware. It is semi-agentic. I think Travis had mentioned that kind of types of operation and being like fully autonomous. The Aider tool is just semi-agentic. It doesn't go into full autonomous mode. It'll ask you a lot of questions. It'll kind of guide you through the process, which I really like. One downside, no MCP support currently that Aider can use. There are MCP servers written to use Aider on the other side, which is kind of interesting. You could have your Claude Code orchestrate Aider and theoretically save some tokens, but there's no MCP support in Aider itself. So that's a one limiting factor here. It does support voice interactions. Goose, the GUI, has voice capabilities, and Aider through the command line actually has voice capabilities. And you can use multiple models in the same session. And I'll show a quick demo of that as we go through the quick demo right here. Is that you can actually have a different architect model than the coder model, than obviously the voice model, than the weak model that's actually making quick decisions under the covers. So it's like an orchestration platform of multiple models going on simultaneously. We'll come back in here to talk about that afterwards. We'll quick
Quick
Chrome.
question, Kelvin, for you.
Yeah,
Do you have much experience using local models with Aider, or is that just it's an option and it's a kind of a nice to have feature?
I have toyed with it. I've never used it seriously yet,
Okay.
just because most of the projects we are on don't require me to use any kind of a local model. But if they did, the Devstrel model and the Llama 3 and 3.2 models from Meta actually
Hmm.
quite capable. What's key for those models that you run locally is that they have a large context window. You will need to change a setting in Olama to get the context window to be larger than 8K. But once you do that, it is capable of blowing out whole project skeletons and just giant chunks of
Wow.
code and reading in more and more of the context and being quite capable. I think if you didn't do that, you would have a limiting experience and you might think it isn't working well for you. But there's just a little bit of tuning that needs to be done for that to work. Now, I have a MacBook Pro with an M4 Max CPU with 64 gig of RAM. So
Mhm.
that gives me a lot of breathing room to be able to run my IDE plus Olama plus the models, because some of these models can be quite large and use 20 30 gigabytes of your RAM or more. So
Right.
having 64 available finally made that decision to upgrade the RAM much more logical and makes sense. Okay, let me see here. I want to show off real quick the code we've got in here. So the code structure we've got is actually there's a backend folder with the Django app, a front end folder with the Next.js app in it. I've got a Kubernetes folder in here that has all the manifests for deploying local sandbox and production, and then we've got Terraform for later. We do have a full GitOps pipeline with this, but we're not running that today. Right now, with that running, this should be yeah. Here we go. Oh, that's the Goose one. Here's the Aider demo one. This is running using Tilt to manage and maintain all the interactions between me and my local Kubernetes cluster. So I can sit and watch, as code changes, it pushes the code into the cluster. That again is a challenge for these coding agents. They don't know how to run commands necessarily in that cluster. So that's one of the things that you have to be highly aware of is how do you tell your coding agents how to run commands up in the cluster? Let's see here. I want first one I do is a lot of times I'll use some prompts to ensure that the coding agent understands what I want to do here. So I've got a prompt that says this project using tilt and kind to run local Kubernetes clusters for development. Show the running pods for this project. So this will require the agent to think about how it's going to do that. And so you can see right here, it's like, okay, cool, I can run this command. And this is the semi-agentic part of Aider, is that it'll ask you. You can also say, don't ask again, but in this case, I will say yes, and it'll start running some commands, and you can be like, do you want to add that output back into the chat? So you can actually make the chat aware of everything that's going on inside of here. You can also now tell it to get pods. You can say, yeah, I'll add that in the chat, add this all into my like namespaces. So you start gathering a lot of interesting data, about what's going on. See here. The next thing I want to do is see if it can create a Django superuser inside of the Kubernetes cluster. Because be able to access the running Django, which I showed off right here, if we click on this 8001, you can see I've got a running local Django with the Aider demo. If I go to /admin, I don't have a username and password to log in here yet. So I think admin doesn't work. Nope. It's going to be like, sorry. But if I come back here and say create a Django instance, or create a super user in the Django instance with that and username admin and password admin, we'll see if it can actually get that done. And sure enough, it knows that it needs to use kubectl exec to be able to understand this. Now it's going to ask for adding certain files into the chat so it can get additional context. I mentioned Aider is very Git aware. So what it does is it actually has a repository map from Git that it keeps into its context as well. So it knows how to find quickly files based on structure. So there's common files in like a Django project that it'll know that it needs to get access to. So here it's going to actually ask for that so it can understand uh, it's wanting to understand the settings files to know how to do that. So I need to create, oh, it's interesting. So this is where they can get a little bit off the rails. It's actually trying to make management commands for me to create super users, but I'm like, no, you have that ability. Use the manage. Oh, it looks like it did it. It didn't actually execute it. Huh. Use the kubectl command to create the super user. See if it figured it out. I may punt on this and see if it does it. Ah, here we go. Yes. Let's see if that worked. Of course not. Well, that's beside the point. Some of these tools have trouble, again, understanding your project structure. Let's get down to the real prompt that I put up there in the original setting. Is that this project was bootstrapped from SCAF, and it uses Next.js on the front end and Django on the back end. It originally was written with GraphQL API support, but I want to actually convert the app to use the REST API. This will be interesting because I may have to turn this one into like full automatic mode, is that it's going to analyze the various files that are inside my project, try and understand what's going on inside of there, and says, yeah, do I want to add all these? I'm going to say don't ask again, and we're going to let it rip. Don't ask again, don't ask again. Why is it still asking me again? Stop asking me, just do it.
Looks like it's going through every single file. Is that per session, or will that persist when you come back into here?
So the memory of the session will persist between launches, and so you can tell it I want to relaunch with that session. Actually, you should also pay attention to is the amount of tokens you're currently using. So you can see right here, I've got only 9K, almost 9K of tokens used currently on Aider with using Claude Sonnet 4. But let's take this next level with this tool. I'm going to tell Aider to use architect mode, and we're going to use the Fireworks version of DeepSeek, and we'll use the editor model of Sonnet. So this actually enables a couple things. And another thing we can do in here is if you're working with an IDE and Aider, you can say watch files and it'll look for edits coming from your editor as well. And you can actually put in special comments in your editor that'll trigger Aider to watch for those comments and say, hey AI, fix this or implement this. And so you can actually do that in here if you wanted. So we go. This is going to use once the Anthropic key. Ah, of course. No, it should have used the okay, so here I've got DeepSeek and I've got an editor model of Sonnet, although it's gonna fail. Hold on a second. I think I can do this real quick. Uh Let me open that up here. One thing, if you're using 1Password, you can copy secret reference, and that's super handy because I can do this now. Export Anthropic API key equal, and we'll just grab that from 1Password if you have the 1Password command line installed, and it'll never go in the clear, which is also really nice. There, now that should work. Bingo. Let's repaste my prompt in here and see if the DeepSeek model with a bit of architecting can figure out what's going on. So here you can see a lot more reasoning happening, and it's showing you all the thinking going on in the DeepSeek model, but it's incredibly quick. So it starts to think about what kind of changes it needs to make, what files we touched, all these kinds of bits, and it's still using the same session and history from before. So yeah, I do want to add that. We will do that. Yep, all that stuff. We're going to add this in and let her rip. And I find this interesting as a developer because I will sit and like read along the thinking and be like, oh yeah, or no, wait, hold on, you're way off track. So make sure you pay attention to what these tools are doing for you. I don't think vibe coding is the future. I think actually understanding and working with these tools as your sidekicks is really the future here.
I appreciate that delineation, Kelvin, because I often use that output as a signal to like stop, course correct.
Yeah. Now, one thing you'll notice here is that it is doing like a diff format. See the replace and the search. This actually is really efficient when it comes to using tokens compared to like Claude Code. It uses a diff format on the backside. Oh, it's interesting. List index out of range. Maybe it's just got too big. We'll just go into slash code mode here and tell it to do the same thing. Oh, that's not it. Sometimes if you typo, here we go, slash code had a space in front of it, so it took that as the text I wanted to send to my LLM. Now we're in the coding mode, and we can basically send the same thing. And so it's going to, again, I don't know why it's thinking again. So it should already have that thinking in there. What I'm going to do is while that's doing that, we're going to move on to the Goose demo, which will be somewhat similar. One thing I want to note is that the way I can tell my editor or my agent how to do things is using special files like conventions.md. So Creator will load and launch and look for that file. There is a new standard on the way for agents.md out there, and many of these tools can actually read in multiple files simultaneously, which means you can launch multiple instances of the same tool, but with different configuration files and conventions. So you can have a DevOps agent, and you can have your backend developer agent, and your front-end developer agent who have special instructions that know how to do that. You do have the ability to use, I mentioned showing tokens. If you want to clear the context and kind of start fresh with the various LLM slash, there's a lot of slash commands built into Aider, which make it quite nice. And you can actually start with that lint command and test command, and it can actually run your tests for you as you change code on the backside. So Aider's very developer friendly, developer centric, wants to run your tests, wants to be get integrated, and it saves its changes as it makes changes to your code as git commits in there. Of course, it hasn't changed a darn thing yet. It's getting a lot of extra context in there. We'll come back to Aider, see if it does actually make some changes. But let's get on to Goose. Goose is another one, command line version and the GUI version, which I already showed. This is developed by Block, the people who are formerly Square. It's all full open source. The reason there's a GUI is they really meant it to be more than just a developer tool. People across the business in all of Square or Block have been using this to manipulate spreadsheets, and obviously you saw the MCP to manipulate the browser. So the MCP was a real focus of the Goose tool. Does support the multiple LLMs plus the local versions via Olama. It's fully agentic with integrated tooling. It does support the MCP. It does support Open Router. It does use things like your Mac keychain to store the credentials and keys. So it's really nice to have that no secrets on the file system bit or environment variables to deal with. At least on a Mac, it seems very native and feels good. Some new things they've added in Goose recently that are important to note. They've added in recipes. So you can set up a predefined set of extensions, like MCP extensions you want, a predefined model you want, and a system prompt and an instruction prompt, kind of as a nice little package. And you can have sub recipes. And so as you make a recipe, you can actually have a sub recipe call off like a tool, for example, that has a clean context, doesn't have all the noise from the main context in it, and you pass it to just the data you want it to do some work on, and then the output from that sub recipe gets added into the full context of the main path of your whatever you're working on. So I think it's pretty powerful. It also has the ability to do sub agents, so you can actually tell it to spawn off, 5 parallel sub agents to work on some task in parallel. That's also possible with Goose, which is kind of nice. Similarly, it has a conventions file called goosehence. They are also in their documentation noting that they're going to be moving toward that agents.md standard as well. You can restart a session. By default, Goose will start new sessions each time you start up your Goose terminal command, but you can actually resume pre-existing sessions and you can get lists of the sessions that are in there. And it does have multiple permission modes. We saw with Aider, there's kind of the yes, no, or don't ask me again, which didn't seem to work. There's actually a completely autonomous mode, a manual approval mode, smart approval, and chat only mode. So you can kind of go into read only, don't mutate a darn thing mode, which is a little more comforting. So Goose gives you those bits out of the box.
Hey,
Uh,
Calvin, quick
yeah,
question for you
yeah.
from the audience and Travis. Mark asks, so are code reviews a thing of the past?
No, goodness, no. Actually, they're a thing of the future. Everyone will be doing them because you shouldn't trust these things. These are, what do you call them? Unreliable narrators in the story, but they're also about as capable. They're a very well educated, knowledgeable intern. They don't know all the best practices you know until you tell them about the best practices, which is why crafting these convention files is going to be really important, and having code reviews to make sure that they're not getting off the rails is also very important because they can go off and do some things you just aren't expecting and you'd want them to do. But I think code reviews are going to be we're going to become more managers of agents as
Mm.
developers and guiding them to the right solutions. But that leaves an interesting hole in the market in my mind for the junior developers, people coming right out of school. I don't know how they're going to learn that level of guidance. Like Travis and I have been doing this for literally decades, and so we're really good at guiding these kinds of tools. So that'd be interesting to see what happens there. Actually, I'm going to kick off the. See, go ahead and do the user registration endpoint. We'll see if we can get some code finally changing over here. Okay, we'll head over to Goose. Where did my Goose demo go? Here we go. So we're in Goose. On this side, I've got the Goose directories like opened up here. I just launched Goose. One nice thing about Goose, like the config that you use between your GUI and the command line tool are shared. So are the keys. So no matter which way you launch it, it's going to use whatever your configurations are. For example, if I wanted to change which provider I'm using, I can come here and type goose config. Must be configured. There we go. And this gives a nice little text UI for enabling changing up the various settings inside of Goose, which providers are available, what extensions are turned on. So we'll do the same thing with Goose. I do have a Goose hence in here. We should be able to give it. Okay, you notice that window pop open. This is the MCP for Serena that is actually a language server running behind the scenes, and it opens up a nice little log window so you can actually see what it's doing mostly to know if your MCP, if your model is using it or not. Sometimes you have to poke and prod and tell it, remember, you've got Serena there as a language server. Don't forget to use it because it won't always use it. Sometimes it'll say ignore it. Let's do the same thing. Let's ask it for a list of all the running pods. Actually, let's do that one. That's a fun one. Tech stack. Describe the tech stack of this project. A really common operation I'll use for this is when I'm going into a brand new project. I don't know anything about it. Maybe it got dropped on my plate. I'm supposed to come in here and help rescue something. This is a great way where these agents can help you because they'll go through and like look at the directory structure, look at the files in here, find some key files that sound like they might be important, like an architecture diagram or a getting started file, and it will, so you can see it's doing an ls, it's looking at the view. So this is nice to see here. Viewing the README. How many developers open up a project and forget to go read the README document, and it says exactly how to get started, and yet you will sit and spin your wheels for like 5 hours trying to figure out how to get the project launched? Well, these agentic coding agents are smarter than us in that they will go and do it every time. They'll go and read all these things. You can see there, it's reading the architecture diagram. It's looking at the backend folder, looking at the front end folder. This will take a hot minute. Let's actually check in over on our aider to see what it's doing.
We're about the halfway mark.
Perfect. We may start over on the next one real quick. I'll let that keep running. Hopefully it'll give us a good overview of our project. The last one I'm going to cover half of this with, and I'll pass off to Travis, is Claude Code. Claude Code initially for me was probably one of the more productive ones. It actually understood my project structure really, really quickly. We're going to do a very, very live test of this one. I have got a Claude demo running right here. And we'll open up another little window next to it. And we'll go into Claude demo. And I have not touched this one yet at all. There's no Claude MD file in here. There's no conventions files. I want to see if it can figure out how to list the pods without me telling you any more about it. So we'll start up Claude. And one of the things you want to do says ensure, yes, proceed. That's fine. Totally fine. What we'll want to do, though, is probably init this project to give me an initialized Claude.md file, which is kind of cool because it's going to go through and actually analyze your repository and put some initial conventions in there based on the way you do work, which is kind of nice. So that you get basically a nice starting point from that. While that one's going, let's go back over here and check in on Goose. Here we go. It's a little hard to read because of the white on yellow, but you can see that it's giving me a tech stack overview of all the front end, back end, all the infrastructure pieces, Kubernetes and AWS and Tilt, and uses ECR. Pretty killer like overview. Let's send it on its way to refactor this from GraphQL to REST API. Now that it knows all about the project. Yeah, see here, that init is doing the exact same thing basically that Goose just did for me, looking at all the files, trying to understand how things work, and now it's made its own little to-do list, creating a comprehensive Claude.md file. And you can see the tokens. You can just watch money burn on the command line right there, which is always fun.
Needs a little fire icon.
It totally needs a fire icon for that. Yeah, so the dynamic tasks. So it is creating a sub agent. So this is new. The Goose, actually, you just saw it launch another MCP server. It has created a sub agent to go after this task so it can actually work on multiple parts of my code in parallel. And I didn't tell it to do that. It just figured out a game plan for attacking this problem and launched a sub agent right there to do more work on my behalf. I'm surprised my computer is still alive, given that I'm running 3 Kubernetes clusters locally with 3 different coding agents all going at it full speed right here. Okay, there we go. It is creating, it just created it. It knows what it is. It knows that it's using Tilt for local dev, which is really helpful. List the running pods. We'll see if it gets that right. And you can talk to it pretty English. It's going to ask you if you can run certain kinds of commands. So here it's asking if I can proceed with git kubectl. That's not on its whitelist, So it's going to ask. Now you can create a Claude whitelist of commands that it's automatically allowed to run. So given what your organization's level of uh, confidence with that is, there you go. So it does understand. Now see here, create. Hey, let's see if this one works a little better. Django super user with username, admin, and password admin. I just found the Claude code worked really well out of the box without much cajoling. And I think uh, it's getting a little upset about the TTY terminal bit. I think it's going to figure out that it can add in a non-interactive flag and tell it to go again. So it knows that if I want to not make a super user, I'm not just running the Python manage command locally. I have to run that inside of this terminal. Actually, 8,000 is not right. It's actually going to be 8,001. Let's see if that one worked. 8,002. And then I'm going to pass this over to, that's the Goose demo. Let's go to 2. There's the Claude demo. And let's see if admin works. Bingo. So it did the magic. It went inside my Kubernetes clusters and did all the things. So actually, I'll let Travis take over from here with the rest of the Claude Code demo.
All right, thank you. Let's just see if I've got the right desktop.
Briefly, while we're switching over, we had an earlier question on whether or not we were planning to touch on Codex or GitHub Copilot agents, specifically autonomous agent working on an assigned issue.
Okay, well, before I hop in, I can briefly address that question. I have used Codex in another scenario in the work life to do an agent evaluation. I was very unimpressed with it. It does not have good environmental setup. Like it doesn't have an internet connection once the project kicks off. So if you need to update packages, which I was trying to do, it just didn't work. It was really limited. I can't speak to the GitHub Copilot agent side of things. I'd imagine it might be similar to what we see in Cursor, but I unfortunately can't go too deep into that. Cool. So what do we have here? We have another terminal. Woo! When are we gonna get out of the terminals to ID? Soon, soon. Don't worry.
It's not old school, Travis. It's us. We're the new hotness.
Right? It's so old we're new again. I laugh at that because like my professional experience, I started writing C code for point of sale systems 20 some years ago. So my make files then were GNU make, not the kind of the modern make that we're using. Anyway, I digress. So I've got Claude Code open here. I said earlier in the session that I like to kind of switch between Claude Code and a more kind of traditional IDE-based tool like Cursor. Why would I want to do that? Well, Claude Code I find is slightly more autonomous in certain scenarios, and it's really good at like building good test suites. So before we get there, I've got a repository open. It is a really simple MCP server, and we're just going to ask it what it is. What is this repo? Let's see what it comes up with. It's going to read all the things. And to Calvin's point, I do find Claude to be really good, a lot less prodding. I find Cursor to be pretty good. Even 6 months ago, it took a fair bit of prodding. Prior to that, I used Windsurf, not featured here today, but kind of, I would say, the originator of the IDE, agentic IDE experience. So what do we have here? It's telling me this is a Clima MCP server that provides free weather data using the National Weather Service API. It's designed for AI assistant integration and offers some features. How good is the test suite? And
Good
while
question.
I find it's the one thing that these agents have gotten better at is remembering to kind of pay attention to the test and usually run them. Oh yes. What's prompting me? Yes. Add it to the list. Yes. So it's going to go through. It's going to do some analysis. Oh, here we go. Keeps going. Just going to run the test. We'll give that just a moment to run. While it's running in the background, here's a real simple kind of client I put together for this. It's using fast MCP as well as fast API. The reason being that I'm allowed to kind of combine the two. Got the MCP server running in the SSE mode, server send events. I've got a real simple web page here that allows me to have a nice simple client. I'd say this is a great use case for vibe coding. I vibe coded this. I don't care. I just want
Yeah.
it to work. I just wanted something to test with that's easier.
I think experimentation is a safe place.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. And then, my mind then wanders to, how can you start building some sub agents to add a little more rigor potentially to that to help flag issues and, help continue the automation of me as we go. So the idea is I connect to a server. Oh, undefined, of course. It was running at one point, I swear. But let's
How we
see.
know it's real.
Right, for sure. So let's look at what it's told me. I have a 56 test, testing about 1,500 lines of code. Um, it's got a service-oriented testing, comprehensive fixtures. It's using mocks. Uh, Demonstrates enterprise-level quality through mocking, comprehensive assertions, professional CI/CD integrations, and it's well structured for maintainability and reliability. That's awesome. Full confession, I didn't write this. I just prompted Claude to write all these tests because I wanted to see what it could do. I wanted to see how well it could take this. I think before I asked Claude to enhance the test suite, I had maybe a handful of real simple tests, like just make it work. And I would have said something like, make this a robust test suite. Something as simple as that. I didn't have to give it a whole lot of like context. I didn't have to give it, a whole lot of real specific instructions. Now, I take more of an iterative style where, maybe I'll start off with a simple request. I'll kind of watch what it's doing. I might stop it, course correct. I might encourage it to go deeper on certain areas. Um, being mindful of what it's doing, but using it as a companion along the way. So you can see here, it's got an updated list of to-dos. You'll find both Claude Code and Cursor tend to drive from a list of to-dos. They make a plan, and then they action that plan, which is a more recent addition. I was at I think, a webinar a while ago where, it was the advice was to write this out by hand, kind of start doing hand driven markdown files. But the tools are advancing. They've obviously picked that up as a best practice, and it's going to go forward. So this might take a little while, but the nice thing is I could walk away right now. I could probably come back in the next half an hour, and provided it had all the commands it needed to run in the allow list, I'd probably have a really comprehensive test suite. Do you want to create? Sure. At the end of the day. One that, might need a little bit more nurturing to get 100%. There might be things that don't necessarily align. I could get away with actually putting an instruction file in at that stage. Um, but it's going to carry on in the background, doing its thing, checking through its list, and doing the heavy lifting. Which is great. I wouldn't advise kind of using a traditional IDE and this at the same time. You might get a little bit confused on the same code base, what changes came from where, what's going on.
I
Uh,
have a senior developer who would disagree with that. He runs multiple plugins simultaneously, all affecting the code simultaneously.
oh gosh, okay.
It sounds like
I just,
chaos.
it's just, I don't know if I can handle the stress of that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so I think for me, even though like there might be autonomous or semi-autonomous, I like to kind of keep one
Yeah,
task, keep an eye
yeah,
on it,
same.
what's happening.
I'm more like you.
Awesome.
Coming up to the 45-minute mark.
Okay, so let me just kill this. So I'm gonna drop out of that. Get reset. Hard. All right. Cool. And let's bring this over again. No, I don't think it's up and running. Where is my? Is it behind here? Show all windows. Oh, there it is. Put it over on the other screen. All right, so let's drop into Cursor. Oh, before we get there, let's do the actual slides. Cool. Cursor, developed by the Cursor team, acquired by Anthropic. It's a proprietary editor, supports both on OpenAI and Anthropic models. You could also, I haven't gone to that level, but I believe you can run local models and put like a proxy in front of it and basically send it there like a light LLM proxy. Um, it does support MCP. I think most of the tools out there do these days. And you specify conventions in the cursor/rules, or there is another top level way of doing it, but this seems to kind of be the emerging mechanism. And the thing I really want to dig into here is more the explore, plan, and build loop. Like how do I work with something? How do I kind of get into that flow state? How do I continue to chip away at this? All right. So let's go here. I'm gonna just kill what I had tried to run in the background, but I must have messed something up at some point here. Oh no, that's the slides. Wrong window. There we go. This is the right window. All right, let's kill this. And let's just get into it. So what you're going to see here is kind of the standard IDE experience. I've got the file explorer here. I've got my agent chat mode here. I can pick my models. GPT-5, GPT, in my experience, is not a good coding model. 2 years ago, when I was trying to write maybe 100 lines of Python, it was about the same, I would say, but Anthropic's really pulled ahead. I generally use Claude 4, the non-thinking model. You could put it into auto mode where you just give it full control and let it run the commands. Not recommended. Uh, in max mode. The two biggest things to kind of draw attention to here would be the agent and ask. So if you're an early stage developer, I would say put this into ask mode. Don't get it to write the code, get it to maybe explain a concept, get it to explain why the test suite's good or bad, get it to talk through an architectural change, like why you would want to make it that way. This won't affect your code. Agent mode, it will affect your code, but that's running in the foreground. And if we go to the background, we're going to run this in kind of that semi-autonomous state where it's kind of pushed off into the cloud of sorts. It's running, it's doing its thing. You could continue to make changes here as well. I don't use that one too much. It's a rather newer feature. I'm just going to stick in the agent mode for now. Let's just say something like help me make a dot cursors files. Oh, make that probably doesn't sound great, but it'll figure it out. See if it's going to understand that what I'm asking for here. I've been intentionally vague. So it's doing its to-do list, cursor rules, cursor ignore, cursor compose, instructions for code generation. So we could break this down into front end, to back end, maybe architecture, kind of help you organize it on a per file basis here.
That's one of the things I like about Cursor. I'm not a big fan of Cursor, but I think they did this well, where the multiple files of really being able to split that up.
I would agree. I think this is, I tried it way back in the day, and when it was one big file and mixed results, wasn't too happy with that. It's hard to manage information that
Right.
way.
And LLMs do get confused. If you feed it too much context, it doesn't know what's important.
100%. I think the new term is context engineering that's starting to emerge. Like, how do you manage like what goes into the thing? Infinite
Just wait.
context windows don't yield great results.
Yeah, just wait till next week and we'll have a new one.
Right. Absolutely. So we can see it here. It's doing its thing. I really like the fact that it's got this to-do list now. It's giving me the steps. It's walking through things. The to-do list is also down here. It just makes it really easy to track where it is, what it's up to, how it's unfolding. It does this weird kind of thing where it tracks the changes in the IDE. They'll also reflect as Git changes, even though I haven't approved them, which feels a little strange at times. Oh, these are from the previous. But the idea would be that if I want to keep it, I just click keep all. I go to the next file. I can click keep all, and I can click keep all. So, not too hard, pretty straightforward, but I'm gonna stop that for now. The thing I wanted to show was, let's see if we can, let's ask it a question. How do I run this? So kind of back to that explore step.
We're coming up to the last 10 minutes, Travis.
All right.
Some time for a couple questions.
Okay. Well, let me just hop quickly to a different scenario here. I want to compare cities' weather. Can you help me add that? That typing's not great. It'll figure it out. I think it's important that you don't have to type everything perfect. So now it's going to go through. This is actually adding a feature. It's going to give us a little bit of an understanding of, a more real world. Like we're going to change some code here. Multi-city comparison. Now, the difference here is if I'd switched this to ask mode, it just would have simply told me what was going on. Wouldn't have gone about trying to make these changes. And, of course, when it's live, things don't move quite as fast as when you're practicing.
Of course, right?
I was hoping to at least get one file popped up and kind of show the line by line capabilities. Here
There
we
you
go.
go.
Okay, so this is a whole new file. Once again, it's asking me, do I want to keep all of it? I'm not going to sit here and read this line by line because we're in the middle of a demo, but I would probably just hit keep all. And then I'd move here and I would see, okay, cool. It's giving me a more like line-based diff for this next file. And if I go here, I get into, the real nitty-gritty surgical precision of what it's changing to make that comparison happen. So you can just click through if you want to. Please, make sure your test suite is good and all the other factors there. Treat it more as an exploration, an experiment from which you would want to go through and do more hardening. I love to do little experiments, then ask it to make the code cleaner, to make it more modular, just to apply all the good engineering principles. Maybe even do some pre-hooks and other things that just kind of, bring a little more sanity to the project.
Yeah, I would agree. I think our demos are showing off big code change type things, and I think that's not a great approach for being successful with these tools. Like that smaller chunks is much easier to control and command.
Absolutely. And I think for me, that comes down to that ability to decompose. So kind of
Yeah.
we're exploring, I'd make a plan where maybe, I ask it to help me understand how to make some of these changes, maybe drill into one of those specifically and decompose it a little bit more. And then we said about building and checking. All right, I'm going to move that to the side. I will move this as well. And let's just briefly spend a little bit of time touching on Devin. So Devin, it's developed by Cognition Labs. It's closed source. It was marketed as the first AI software engineer. An interesting premise. It says fully autonomous. My experience is it operates a little more on the semi side, but that was a few months ago. Maybe it's coming up. It does say MCP no MCP support here. I did find just before this session that they just added MCP support because things are moving quick. So that's kind of interesting and nice. And it's really focused on kind of the end-to-end delivery, the ability to, think about delegating a complete set of tasks out to another developer, rather than kind of that more code assisted. And this is what I was thinking of when I said the autonomous agent side of things. You give it an instruction and it goes, type of thinking. Very much natural language based. It'll run code, it'll fix errors, it can make PRs without human intervention, possibly deploy. I haven't quite gotten it to trust it that much. There's less control, so it's a little bit harder to audit, debug than maybe a more traditional IDE or CLI-based tool. I'm not going to run through the making it build everything type of exercise, but I'm going to look at just a real simple one here. I have an old .NET Core project. It's for the Hangfire library. It's a task scheduling framework. And years ago, when I picked it up, they didn't have a basic auth filter. So I made one, published it, forgot about it, realized that it had 5 million downloads, and went, oh, maybe I should maintain this thing. So I thought this was a great exercise to walk through. I was like, hey, it needs an upgrade to the latest .NET Core version. What it's going to do is it's going to make a plan. It's going to look through it. It's going to get the plan. It's going to get you to confirm the plan. And then it's going to go about making those changes. We just go see the details here. We can see the pull request it put together up to .NET. So I was on 7. I didn't realize I was on 7. I probably made a change at some point. And then it's going to do some commenting as well. You can see CodeRabbit. I also use another AI code review agent called CodeRabbit. I've got a lot of personal repositories. Sometimes it's nice just to get a perspective, even if I'd argue with it and don't agree with everything it finds. But it's food for thought at the very least.
Can Devin create issues in GitHub too, or does it just make pull requests?
I don't know if it can make issues. I know you can definitely give it like issues to work on.
Go attack this.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of it sits more in that kind of like coworker type space. You can ask it questions. So here's another one where I asked it about the Hangfire module. It'll build its own knowledge repository around that repository, around the Git repo, make some diagrams. Interesting thing in the settings is this is where it becomes really team friendly. You can have shared knowledge across all of your projects. You can make common playbooks. Maybe you always want to upgrade from .NET, I don't know, 5 to 7 first before going to 8. You could put that in here as a series of steps, the procedure, make it reshareable, kind of like the recipes you were talking about in Goose.
Yeah, that's really similar to the recipes.
You can make a machine. I haven't set this up. I started and then I went, oh gosh, it's a lot of work. But if you're going to use this seriously, give it its own machine. Otherwise, it just has to do everything ephemerally. It's a lot slower, a lot messier. You can store secrets. You can do all the fun stuff here. Here's the MCP integrations that it supports. I like that they're curated. It's not like go find it yourself and plug it in.
Yeah. I like the it creates a plan for it. And I think the other ones can be guided in that path, and it's a good approach. So it's not exclusive to Devin, but the other ones don't do it out of the box.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. I think that was the piece when I was looking at Devin a few months ago that it really kind of put it forward, and everyone's I think slowly starting to pick up pieces of that as they move here. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Maybe we'll go back over the slides real quick. I think we just got a couple like last little wrap up bits in here. If you are looking for ways to combine these models in interesting ways, like for example, the architect with the coder model, the Aider project maintains a polyglot benchmark. Then you can, if you go to the webpage, you can see all of them. That's the most expensive one, O3 Pro from OpenAI of like $146. But there's some in there that go into the pennies to actually complete the benchmark and actually, may score in a 10 to 20% success rate. So that's kind of an interesting way of keeping track of which models are kind of best at certain kinds of tasks. And this is just one data point that people should probably be aware of that most people don't see. And next slide here. We did put a quick tool comparison in here. The slides are up on GitHub. If you go to the 6vf.org on GitHub, you can see the source code for this. So if you wanted to come back to these points that Travis and I put in here later, it's all up there on there. There's just a quick tool comparison slide to show it off everything we just talked about. So we don't have to belabor that point. If there's any questions, I think we may want to get to that. If you keep going, I think there's not a single assistant for everybody. I think what we showed 5 different tools that operate in 5 different ways, even though they may sound similar. We use, for our team, they use 2 to 3 of those on a daily basis on an ongoing process. Like they're not just in one only. So I think actually focusing on one might be a mistake, and having multiple in your arsenal is actually a really good direction to go. I do find the open source tools are catching up fast. I do love Goose a lot and Aider a lot. And I think that they give Cursor, Claude Code and Cursor and Devin probably a good run for the money. So I recommend people trying them out. That last slide should just be our contact info if people want to get a hold of Travis or I. And I think we got enough time to take probably one question. So I don't know, Pio, you got a really good one for us?
Oh, we covered there's a few around cost planning, right? So what's the best practice around, minimizing token spend while you're doing that explore mode? And then there's another one that was around security. So where is that? I'd like to hear about experiences where AI generated code inadvertently creates a security flaw. So
I've seen it, definitely. I'll talk about the tokens thing though. Each of these tools are going to consume tokens in different ways. Watch your dashboards for token consumption. Some of the tools have smart ways of like summarizing and compressing your context windows as you go. So, and you may want to manage that yourself too. Some of them allow you to say like slash summarize and basically compress the current context down so you aren't sending as many tokens back and forth. Aider may be one of the most efficient ones out there as far as token uses because of the diff format. It tries to be smart about what it sends across the wire and not send whole files, depending on which models you're using. I don't know if Travis, you had anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I find that, I mean, well, monitoring token cost is important. I carry a personal license as well to Cursor, and I have it on like just spend, and I maybe spend $50 a month, like poking around, exploring, doing these projects. So, be mindful, but don't make it a limiting factor, especially if you're new to the tool. Just explore and kind of get familiar and comfortable, and then maybe lend an eye to being a little bit more
But if you're
cautious.
getting that much value out of these tools, like for example, we have a Claude Code project that's heavily driven in Claude Code where we use multiple parallel Claudes going at once. And then we may spend a couple $1,000s a month on API tokens for that project, but it's totally worth it. Like the amount of time saved is unbelievable compared to what the cost of those tokens are.
Absolutely. I mean, there's for tooling that makes you that much more effective, it's
Right.
worth the
It's
investment
totally worth it.
every time.
And I guess then on the security side, I would make sure you've got a good CI/CD pipeline set up that has maybe even some pre-commit hooks using security tools like static code analysis tools, etc., against your code to watch for common mistakes because these tools will make the most common of common mistakes. Don't trust them. Watch them closely. Put automated tools to make sure they've got guardrails, and then because they're trained against the worldwide code base of every developer ever who threw something random on GitHub, for example, which is not always good.
Yeah, absolutely, Kelvin. To that point, like this little weather MCP I spun up, like I didn't put some of the security checks in it to begin with, and when I did, it picked up, a handful of really common mistakes, and it fixed them, and I was able to use the existing kind of automation around CI/CD and pre-commit hooks to just make it a lot more robust
Yeah,
experience.
awesome. Well, I think with that, we'll wrap up. We're only 2 minutes over. Not bad on timing. Thank you, Travis, and the folks from Eighth Light for being here and helping me present the Battle of the Bots. I think it was pretty successful. Awesome questions. I may have to go review the questions. If people want to hit me up on LinkedIn with any of those questions, I can make little videos to answer all of them too. I'm sure, Travis, you do the same. He's actually got a really good blog. I've been reading your stuff recently, so I'll give you a shout out and make sure you follow Travis on LinkedIn and his personal blog.
Thank you, Kelvin. Today's been a blast. I really enjoyed doing this with you, and maybe we can do it again sometime.